At 82, I've learned a lot about life, what matters, what fades, and what's truly worth holding on to. But there's one decision I deeply regret: moving into a nursing home. At the time, it felt like the right choice. My family encouraged it. They promised I'd be safe, well cared for, and comfortable. I believed them. I believed in the idea. But once I arrived, I realized the reality was nothing like I had imagined. From the outside, it sounds reasonable. Meals prepared, medical help nearby, a place designed for people like me. But what no one tells you is what it quietly takes away. Not just your routines, not just your privacy, but your independence, your purpose, and your identity. That's why I'm telling you this now. Because if you're considering this choice, either for yourself or someone you love, there are 6 hard truths I wish someone had told me. And once you hear them, you may never see nursing homes the same way again. The biggest shock wasn't the small room, the set meal times, or the unfamiliar faces. It was the quiet realization that I had lost control over my own life. Before I moved in, my days were mine. I decided when to wake up, what to eat, when to rest, and how to spend my time. I could walk outside whenever I wanted, sit in my favorite chair by the window, or make a cup of tea just as I liked. Small things, but they were mine. Inside the nursing home, those choices slowly disappeared. Breakfast came whether I was hungry or not. Lights went off at a certain hour, even if I was still reading. If I wanted to go outside, I had to wait for someone to help me. Even what I wore or ate started to feel like someone else's decision. At first, I tried to hold on. I asked for a different meal. I stayed up a little later, but over time, I stopped asking. It was easier that way. I had lost control over the most basic aspects of my life, and it was a bitter pill to swallow. I remember one morning, early in my first week, I sat up in bed and reached for the book I had been reading back home, only to realize it wasn't there. The bed felt unfamiliar. The walls were bare. My favorite chair, my blanket, my little collection of things, they were all gone. They were replaced with neutral colors, assigned furniture, and a quiet that didn't feel peaceful. It felt empty. It was as if a part of me was missing, and I was left with a void that no amount of institutional care could fill. That was the moment it hit me. I wasn't in charge of my life anymore. I had become part of a system that worked efficiently, but not personally. Every hour was spoken for. Every routine was shared. And the freedom I once took for granted had quietly slipped away. No one tells you how much those small decisions mean until they're gone, but getting it back is almost impossible once you give up your independence. You adapt because you have to. You follow the rules not because you agree, but because it's the only way to get through the day. And in doing so, you slowly lose pieces of yourself. Before you take that step, ask yourself, are you ready to surrender the simple freedoms that make life feel like your own? Because once they're taken, you will miss them more than you ever thought you would. Regret number 2, feeling forgotten. One of the hardest parts came quietly, not with a loud argument or a single moment, but with time. When I first arrived, my family promised they'd visit often. And in the beginning, they did. My daughter came by once a week, and my grandchildren visited on weekends. There were smiles, stories, and familiar voices that made the place feel less cold. But as the weeks passed, the visits started to space out, a call instead of a visit, a promise to come next weekend that turned into maybe next month. I understood. They had lives, responsibilities, and things to take care of. I told myself it was normal, expected even, but understanding doesn't make it hurt less. Holidays were the most painful. I'd dress up, fix my hair, sit by the front windows, and wait. And sometimes they did come, just late or only for an hour. Other times I sat there alone, pretending I wasn't waiting at all. I remember clearly one evening. I was holding my phone, staring at my son's name on the screen. I hadn't heard from him in a while. I thought about calling just to hear his voice, but I paused. I didn't want to seem needy. I didn't want to remind him that I was sitting alone, hoping someone would think of me. So I put the phone down, and that's when it really sank in. I wasn't part of their world anymore. I was watching it from the sidelines. It's a feeling that's hard to put into words, but it's a loneliness that's different from being physically alone. It's the loneliness of feeling forgotten, of feeling like you're no longer a priority in the lives of those you love. It's not that they stopped loving me. It's just that when you're no longer around, when you're not part of the daily routine, it's easy for people to assume you're fine, that you've adjusted, that you don't need them the way you used to. But I did. I still do. I see it in the eyes of others here, too. Sitting in common rooms, glancing at the door every time footsteps approach, hoping it's someone for them. Often it's not. If you're thinking about moving into a nursing home, ask yourself, honestly, are you prepared for the loneliness? Because no matter how much your family loves you, once you're out of sight, it's easier than you think to be out of mind. And that feeling, the quiet kind of forgotten, is harder to carry than most people realize. Regret 3. Loss of purpose. When I moved into the nursing home, I thought I was just changing where I lived. I didn't realize I was also changing why I lived. Back home, I had purpose. I had things to do, choices to make, and small responsibilities. That gave my days structure. Watering the plants, making my own coffee, folding laundry, and even just tidying up my space gave me a reason to get up in the morning. They were simple routines, but they reminded me that I still mattered. Once I moved in, all of that disappeared. Meals were made for me, my clothes were washed and returned folded, and cleaning wasn't my job anymore. At first, I told myself it would be nice to rest and finally take it easy. But what I didn't expect was how empty that would feel. Without those small tasks, my days felt long and strangely quiet. I spent hours sitting, waiting. For what, I wasn't sure. I saw it happening to others, too. People who used to be full of energy now passed the time in silence, slowly detaching from the world around them. We weren't tired. We were unneeded. There was a man named Warren, a retired carpenter who had built furniture his entire life. Back home, he was always fixing something, always moving, creating, making things better. He brought a box of old tools when he came here, thinking he could still help with small repairs. But there was nothing for him to fix. There was no wood, no workbench, no projects, just silence. I watched as his hands, once steady and skilled, sat still in his lap for days. One morning, he looked over at me and said, "I don't feel useful anymore." And I knew exactly what he meant, because when you no longer have something to care for, life starts to lose meaning. You begin to feel like a shadow of who you used to be. It's not just about being busy. It's about belonging. Knowing that what you do still matters, even in some small way. And when that's gone, the spirit fades faster than the body ever could. If you're considering this path, ask yourself, what gives you purpose right now? Once you give it up, getting it back isn't always as simple as you think. Regret 4. Declining health faster than expected. Before I moved into the nursing home, I was doing well for my age. I wasn't running marathons, but I could get around on my own. I cooked my own meals, went for short walks, and had a daily routine that kept me active. I thought I was simply choosing a safer place to live, not realizing how quickly that choice would change my body. At first, it felt like a luxury. Meals brought to my room, help just a button away, no stairs, no bending, no heavy lifting. Slowly, however, the things I stopped doing became things I could no longer do. My legs began to feel weaker. I sat more. I walked less. And before I even noticed it, getting out of a chair felt harder than it used to. It wasn't just me. I saw. It happened to others, too. There was a woman named Brenda, 81 years old and sharp as a tack. When she first arrived, she told me she wouldn't slow down just because she lived here. She walked the halls every morning, waving to staff and chatting with anyone who'd listen. But over time, her walks got shorter. Then, she started using a walker. A few months later, she was in a wheelchair. One afternoon, I asked if she wanted to walk to the garden with me. She looked down at her hands, folded in her lap, and said, "I don't know when it happened, but I don't think I can anymore. And that's how it goes. When you stop using your body, you start losing it. We don't always feel it happening, but it's there, quiet, steady, and fast." The more help we were given, the more we seemed to need it. Every comfort came with a hidden cost. Whenever someone reached for something so I didn't have to, I lost a little more strength in my arms. Every ride in a wheelchair to save me a few steps made my legs a little less steady, and eventually the confidence to move on my own started to slip away. If you're considering this transition, ask yourself, not just what you'll gain in convenience, but what you might lose in resilience. Because movement isn't just about getting from one place to another, it's about holding on to your ability to live life on your terms. Once that starts to fade, it's harder than you think to get it back. Regret 5. Loss of privacy and dignity. One of the things I didn't fully understand until I got here was how much privacy I would lose. At home, I had my own space. I could close the door, sit silently, and move through my day however I wanted. No one watched, no one interrupted, and I was in control of my own rhythm. In the nursing home, that changed almost overnight. From the moment I arrived, it felt like my space was no longer mine. Staff came in and out, sometimes without knocking. Room checks happened on a schedule I didn't set. Conversations weren't always private. Even the act of sitting quietly with your thoughts became something you had to find time and space for. Then there's the reality of sharing a room. Not everyone gets a private one. And when you're placed with someone you didn't choose, someone with different habits, noise levels, or health issues, you lose a sense of comfort you never realized meant so much. I was lucky with my roommate. She was kind. But I've seen others struggle. People are woken up all night by snoring or shouting. People who couldn't sleep because they were scared of who was on the other side of the curtain. And then come the deeply personal moments. Things you never thought you'd have to ask permission for. Want to take a shower? You might have to wait until someone is free to help. Need to use the restroom? Press the call button and hope they come soon. I remember sitting there once, waiting, feeling embarrassed that I couldn't just get up and go like I used to. I knew they were doing their best, but knowing that doesn't make it easier. What caught me off guard the most wasn't just the routines, it was the tone. I was spoken to like a task, not a person. Your day was planned out for you. Meals were at a certain hour. It was lights out when someone else decided. You learn to adapt, but you also feel yourself shrinking, bit by bit, into someone you barely recognize. Dignity doesn't disappear all at once. With each small compromise, it erodes slowly until one day you realize how much of yourself you've given up. If you're thinking about this choice, ask yourself honestly, are you prepared to give up the privacy and control you've spent a lifetime building? Because once it's gone, it's not easy to get back, and dignity is a hard thing to lose. Regret 6. It's harder to leave than you think. When I first moved into the nursing home, I told myself it was temporary. I just needed a little time to adjust, rest, and maybe get stronger. If I didn't like it, I'd leave. I believed that. I needed to believe that. But I didn't realize how hard it would be to leave once I got here. In the beginning, it felt manageable. I pictured myself going back home in a few months. But as time passed, that picture started to blur. My house sat empty, and it became harder to maintain from a distance. My children had already started packing things up. They thought they were helping, donating clothes I no longer wore, giving away furniture I wouldn't need anymore, and talking about renting the place out. Every small change made it feel less like mine. When I mentioned going back, they hesitated. "Are you sure you can manage?" they asked. "Wouldn't it be safer to stay where help is always nearby?" I could hear the concern in their voices. But I also heard something else. Doubt. They had already adjusted to this being my new life. And maybe, in some ways, I had too. But the biggest barrier wasn't the house. It was me. After months of living, here I wasn't as strong. I didn't walk as far. I needed help with things I used to do without thinking. The comforts that made life easier had quietly taken away my confidence in my ability to live independently. I started to second-guess myself. Could I really cook again? Could I keep up with errands? Could I be alone? I've met others in the same situation. People who thought they were just trying it out. People who didn't realize how quickly temporary can become permanent. Some lost their homes entirely. Others spent their savings on care and had nothing left to go back to. Slowly, the idea of leaving faded into something that felt impossible. No one told me that the path back isn't always clear once you settle in. The nursing home becomes your world, your routines, your new normal, and the life you used to know starts to feel far away. So before you make this decision, stop and ask yourself, are you prepared for the possibility that leaving might not be as simple as you think? Because once you're here, going back isn't just about leaving a place. It's about rebuilding a life you might have already given away. And that, more than anything, is harder than people ever realize. Looking back, I don't regret growing older. I've lived a full life, seen joy and loss, and learned more than I ever expected. But I do regret thinking that moving into a nursing home was my only option. When I arrived, I was promised comfort, safety, and better care. And in some ways, I received those things. But I wasn't prepared for how much I had to give up in return. My independence, privacy, sense of purpose, and even my place in my family's world. That doesn't mean nursing homes are all bad. For some, they provide care that truly can't be managed at home. Some people need that level of support, and there is no shame in accepting it. But the truth is, once you step into that world, life changes in ways you can't always take back. So if you're facing this decision for yourself or someone you love, take the time to understand the trade-offs. Don't choose it just because it seems easier or safer. Choose it because it's absolutely necessary, because you've explored every other way to stay in your own space, keep some control over your day, and preserve the little things that make you feel like you. If I could do it again, I would have fought harder to stay in my home, asked for more help before giving up my freedom, and looked into other options. Part-time care, family rotation, community support, anything that would have let me keep being me. Just a little longer. Because the life you have right now, your routines, your choices, your quiet moments, is worth holding on to for as long as you can. Thank you for listening to my story. Now I'd love to hear yours. What did you learn today? What will you do differently? Leave a comment and share your thoughts. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if you found this video helpful, feel free to subscribe, like, or pass it along to someone who's walking the same path. We'll see you again soon.